how to grow a training business. And we've taken a little bit of a different slant to that today. So one difference is that normally there is a much more handsome host here who is called Paul Higgins. He sends his apologies, couldn't make it today, so I'm afraid you have to do it with me. However, it's not just me. I'd also like to introduce Dan Steene. And Dan works for Natwest Group as the SME Banking Strategy lead. And when I read that, I was asking probably the same question. Dan, what does that mean?
Thanks, Jan. Lovely to see you all on the call. Yeah, I'll get on to what that means. Maybe a bit of background about me. So, I've worked in the banking industry for 15 years now. Worked across a number of organisations, both internally but also as a consultant. So I had stints at Deloitte and PwC. Working with kind of always in kind of the banking sector. So I've worked in a number of large organizations and some smaller ones. I've also done time at JP Morgan, had about 4 years working at JP Morgan. I've worked at Nomura, now at NatWest, and as a consultant worked with HSBC, Citi, some of the biggest banks in the world. So I've seen a lot of cultures, and I've seen a lot of change over that time as well. I know that not the majority of the people on this call will necessarily be focused on banking, but as banking has effectively become a technology industry, as our customers operate in every single sector there is, and as we are also one of, if not the most regulated sectors in the world, there is always new challenges and always a need to kind of develop people. And I guess that brings me on to my last point, Jan, which is I'm not an expert in training. So you will all know far more about your industry than I do. But I guess with my kind of banking background and also my corporate strategy background, which is predominantly focused, I'm pleased to say, on how to grow, both how to grow our own business in NatWest, but also how we help our customers grow. I'm hoping that I can give you some good food for thought to take away today, and I hope it's interesting for you. The SME bit. So, yeah, as I say, I've worked in strategy for most of my career. Small, medium enterprises are one of the critical segments that NatWest serves as a bank. We have over 1.1 million SME customers who bank with us. We are the biggest bank for small, medium enterprises in the UK. And I've, for the last 2 years, had the pleasure of working very closely with the managing directors of our SME banking business to help us become, as I say, the biggest business bank in the UK. So that's my job. My job is an advisory one, so I'm not the one making the final decision all the time. But I do try to give great advice to my business leaders, as I say, to help them try and grow their business and also manage it in a very sustainable and efficient way as well, of course. So yeah, and that's me. Any other questions about my background? Very happy to answer, but hopefully that's a quick potted history.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dan, for joining us today, and I hope you will be able to advise some of the leaders here in this webinar. Let's start this and let's kick this off. Now, for those who have attended our webinars before, I tend to ask the question, what is Emissio? So I'm going to start with that. And don't worry, that's only going to take about 2 minutes. So if I am going to share my screen, which is always the tricky part of this technology share, let's see if this works. Please give me a heads up if you can see Emissio. Is that possible? Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. So actually, let's put that in slide note. Probably easier. So as Emissio, by the way, means blended or mixed. We help training companies make more impact, and we do that quite often with transforming into blended learning. But we're also a mixed team. We all have different backgrounds, and we're very proud of that. So with regards to that's our name. We are based in London. We work in the UK. We work in Ireland. We work in some other countries, but I would say those are our two main areas. What is it that we deliver? Well, we work with a company called A New Spring, which we represent. That's enabling the blended learning part. Training impact, we help training companies with. We do that with a product that is called Inmissio SIP. And we also have a marketplace, Eco Journey, which is related to sustainability for training providers. We also manage the business of training community, and this is an excellent example. We do this free monthly webinar, but we also organize a conference, the Business of Training Conference, which always happens in October. And we also have a newsletter. So lots of different ways to get more information, to share your own experience, and to network with others. We deliver, of course, a number of services to implement the technologies. So in essence, we're a technology business, and we have the Inmissio method, which is the method on how we help training providers make more impact. So that's a quick overview. As I said, not much, not long. One more point on what is the impact that we make. Well, we started in 2018. We've enabled just over 1.5 million learners through the training companies that we work with. The customers, and I mean the training businesses we work with, they added millions of pounds to their own revenue streams. And actually, quite a few actually won awards in the work that they've been doing with us. So that's how we made that impact with our customers. Now, let's go to the topic that we talk about today. And we had to give it a starting point because strategy is something that you start with, but then why do you start, and what is the longer term vision or scenario that you want to go to? So the question that we started to ask was, what if I want to sell my training business in 2030, so in 5 years' time? And maybe you don't want to sell your training business. Maybe it's somebody else who's doing it with you. Maybe you're much younger than I am, and you want to run your business over the next 25 years. Doesn't matter. It is the decision that you take today that will enable that. And we set out 3 scenarios, 3 strategies for training companies that we would like to discuss. By the way, let's make it clear. The format of this is always that if you have a question, either put it in the chat. We can also enable the audience to come in and voice their views. So there will be plenty of opportunity for that. Let's have a look at some trends, because what's happening in the training industry at the moment? Well, for the last 2 decades, probably longer, the traditional training market has been shrinking. Shrinking, for example, in terms of how long training programs are. It used to be very normal 20, 30 years ago that we would go on 5-6 day courses. But today, these courses are much, much shorter. Secondly, technology has been disrupting content and coaching, and that's just 2 examples. When I say technology, I mean AI predominantly. Both small and large training companies have been struggling with how easy it is now to make content, but that also means that that content is not always very impactful. So flooding the market with that. Coaching is getting a lot of AI interference, if you like to say it that way, where especially the bottom of that market, AI can do a great job in coaching as well, it seems. And of course, technology empowers quite often the customer. And what I mean with the customer is it empowers L&D in organizations. And that means that sometimes the training provider gets taken out of that loop. So there are a few trends that are not always positive for training providers. Of course, there are also trends that are still very good for the training market. Compliance training, AI senior leadership, senior leadership coaching. Those are elements that are where training is and human training is very much defending its place and really getting a lot of traction. So within that world of a lot of change, we defined three strategies. Training providers can be a performance partner, they can be very specialist, or they could be a commodity player. Now, I have no doubt that there will be other strategies that training providers can go, but we wanted to highlight those three because we see that in the market quite a bit, and we also we see that there are derivatives of those that are other strategies in the market. So we just wanted to highlight those. Let's talk about performance partner first. So I've used a model which is called the business model canvas. I'm hoping and assuming that a lot of people are familiar with the business model canvas. If you're not, I'm holding up a book which is called Business Model Creation. This is from a company called Strategizer. Strategizer is the one that developed the business model canvas. You can Google it. There is a lot of usage of it as well. But if you look at a business model canvas, you always start with the value proposition. So if you are a performance partner, that means that you understand the business or the industry of a particular sector inside out. So your specialization would be understanding that type of business. That could be that your product, your services are coaching, consulting, training that really serve everything on particular customer segments. So, for example, retail banking, to stay close to Dan, or maybe you're a specialist in the insurance market or in the healthcare market or in manufacturing. And the training, coaching, consulting product you develop is to serve the entire audience within that sector. Now, that means that you probably have strategic relationships with your customers that are directly. There are other things in there, for example, your revenue streams, probably subscription models, outcome-linked fees, recurring retainers. There would be different ways that you build your strategy around that. So that's just as an introduction what a performance partner could look like and what their business could look like. Now, if we then identify how could these companies that choose this kind of strategy, performance partner, how could they create value? And Dan, I would love to bring you into this conversation. Some of the opportunities that performance partners would see in the market. I've given a few examples here, but what is your take on a performance partner that serves an industry or particular company?
Yeah, interesting. And thanks, Jan, again for this, because I love thinking about strategic problems in industries that aren't the one that I spend most of my time thinking about. But actually, as I've been, I guess, reflecting on and preparing for this, there's a lot of things that are quite similar, right? And I think across the three strategies that you've laid out, the key point for me, I think, is how you balance that relationship aspect and that kind of knowledge and specialization aspect with true scalability, because value creation in the absence of scalability in any industry is very challenging. So I think in the performance partner space, where I think how you seek to strike that balance is going to be, if you can find a balance where you can keep that sense of kind of personalization, that, all of that good relationship building stuff, but you can actually start to find ways to make that more scalable beyond the time of that individual. That's probably where you have to start to look for a value creation story, as I see it. So I can see you've kind of got up here around technology based speciality. The world, I think, in any industry is a very different place now than even it was kind of pre-COVID. If I look into my own business, we have about 1,000, 2,000 relationship managers. And 5 years ago, they would have had 95% of their meetings face to face. So kind of a very uniform type of skill set almost was needed to be successful. And when we're thinking about training those individuals, taking them from kind of junior graduates up to being very productive, successful relationship managers and effective salespeople, it was pretty straightforward. But actually, the world has changed so much now. So where it was 90% face to face before, it's now more like 50% face to face. And actually, a lot of those clients want to kind of our customers are looking for that kind of hybrid blended approach. So sometimes face to face, sometimes over Zoom, like we're doing today, and sometimes through, like email or WhatsApp chat or whatever. And the skills that you need to be successful in that context start to look quite different as well. So I think firstly, it's understanding, and this goes for I think all of the scenarios you've laid out, but really understanding who your customers are and how they are being impacted by these trends. Not just how those trends are impacting you and your industry, but how is it impacting your customers, and where then do the opportunities arise for you to think about either utilizing the great model you've already got to be successful, or thinking around where are there kind of nuances or things that I could do differently. And I think this even Jan could be a great example today, right? So if you've got a real niche or a speciality, recording a webinar like this, getting some great speakers along, and then using that as collateral, or even as a paid for kind of set of courses that then you don't have to kind of be there in person to deliver it, that would strike me as the kind of thing that could start to evidence that kind of scalability. And I guess, if it's okay, Jan, just to come back to the premise of selling your business in 2030, I think that you've really got to, if that's the kind of the goal, and let's say even absent of that goal, it's to deliver real meaningful growth, then I think you have to start experimenting now in order to figure out over the next couple of years what's going to be the one or two or three things that you really hook onto that take you then start up that kind of hockey stick curve. So yeah, for me, it's customers first. Think about how you can solve their problems and their needs, and then think about how you can do that in ways that isn't just you selling your time effectively.
Thank you for that. Actually, let's ask, is there anybody in the audience that is already maybe going this way, or has experience with this, or wants to share something that maybe a view it maybe it didn't work for the business that you worked in. We look for all kinds of input there. Is there anybody that wants to share anything or has a question around? Well, it doesn't always have to be an interactive webinar, Dan.
No, that's fine.
It can be, and there is plenty of opportunity for people to either share or ask questions. Any questions you have, please put them in the chat. We'll pick them up there as well. Let's go to the next part on this. So when we are talking about scenarios, there are some risks that we identified here as well. We talked about opportunities, liked how you said understanding your customers. I put on some possible risks on here. Dan, if you had to pick out one of these risks, which would you say, oh, that's something to really pay attention to?
Well, that's a great question. So I think one would be data is always for me in strategy there it's the unspoken half of the coin around effective decision making. So it's one thing to have a great idea and a great vision, and it's even one thing to understand your customers intuitively. But if you don't have the right data that can validate that what you're doing is that you're going after the right market, and that B, what you're delivering into that market is effective and has a market, essentially, I think it becomes very difficult to evidence as we think about potentially selling your business. You're going to be wanting to evidence that to any potential buyer, right? That you've got that kind of really well thought through. So I think data is always a huge point. From a risk perspective at the moment, I think talent actually is a real challenge. Speaking very much from the NatWest perspective, the competition for top talent in banking, it has never been higher. And it you've got to have a value. If you're going to have people come and work for you, and you're relying on those people to be the face of your company and to deliver your product into the market, you've got to have a huge amount of confidence that they're the right people, and you've got to have a great value proposition for those people. And again, as kind of generations shift, as behaviors shift, and all that sort of stuff, we see it in some of the roles that used to be seen as like very, very attractive roles in banking. Suddenly then, people don't, 20 young kind of 20-year-olds don't want to be sat in a car driving around to customers and talking to customers. They're much more comfortable being behind a screen and kind of doing that sort of thing. So I think when you talk about training, which by its nature is getting up in front of people and delivering impactful content, I think that could be, if again outside looking in, but I think that could be a bit more challenging than it was maybe 10-15 years ago. And also the business development aspect of it, again, we're all doing much more stuff digitally. It's much harder to build relationships, and you've got to be really tenacious and kind of really, really motivated and self-starting to build a business and to have people help you build a business as well. You want people like that. So I think talent would be the one that I would be thinking about, particularly obviously if you're sort of employing people, and which brings a wealth of challenges as well outside of just growth. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I agree. Talent is definitely the big challenge. And when we look at the performance partner model, actually, talent is key because it's probably the people that you employ that make the biggest difference in that. So it's your biggest opportunity, but also your biggest risk, I would say.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the other of the three models. So, especially smaller training providers quite often choose this kind of area where specialist capability. You might be a subject matter expert in a particular topic, whether it's leadership, whether it's health and safety, or even more specifically, and I actually put some example on here. Usually it's a boutique company. You want to be the go-to expert. I put two examples here. In green, you'll see health and safety in nuclear plants. That's very specific, or financial compliance for UK-based venture capitalists. And then your customers would be operations in nuclear power plants, or HR in the UK-based VCs. So really specialist, quite often niche markets, boutique companies, smaller businesses quite often have this kind of way. But how do you succeed in building a very successful business that you can also that can have longevity, either when you want to sell it, you want to retire? What makes that important part? And Dan, what do you think on that? I put a few things here, but what do you think are the
Yeah,
opportunities here?
th this is a really interesting one. So I think this is like a true double-edged sword when you think about it strategically. So on the one hand, when you think about, when I think across different industries, when the big fish in the market start to start to think about how they can grow, one of the things that they will definitely be looking at is where are the niches where we could deliver something that someone else is doing, but for cheaper, effectively, because we can leverage our scale in the market. And these kinds of specialist niche types of businesses, those are the ones that those are the things that are most easy to kind of build as like a single product and capability. So that can be bad because, a big fish in the market could just build it and basically try and undercut you. But on the other hand, what often big fish in the market, and speaking as like the second biggest bank in the UK, this is a strategy that we use, it's actually often cheaper and easier to buy someone who's already doing this thing really, really well. So in the context of our conversation, Jan, it's really interesting because I think if you're a training provider who's in this space, you need to be very, very aware of the competitive environment, because if you see others starting to kind of come into the space, particularly if they've got significant resources, you should be worried. But equally, if your kind of vision and long-term goal is to sell out, those are exactly the moments where you should pick up the phone and maybe start to have conversations with those players, because they could be the best person to come and buy you, or to work with you. And that is something that we do regularly in NatWest, where we want to offer a kind of specific capability to our customers. So, for example, about 8 years ago, we bought an accounting software platform called Free Agent, and that was because we saw other banks in the market effectively were starting to integrate accounting services into their banking platforms. Now, we looked at that and said we could try and build this capability ourselves, but it's going to cost a lot of money and we don't know anything about this industry. But actually, there's this great business that's there ready to go, that's got a fabulous management team. And we can bring them in, integrate them into our business, and we can bring that talent into the organization as well. So I would be, if I was in one of these positions, that's exactly how I would be thinking about my long-term strategy. If exit is indeed where you want to go, it's how do I start to position myself to really like be bought out by someone who's going to want to have this capability to offer to their customers.
That's one. Well, thank you. And a great example of the free agent and how that helps the audience, the audience you already have to really um, add more value. We see, for example, I put some examples here of small package programs into a certification or toolkit. Quite often, to give yourself an intellectual property, it could be a method, it could be a product, it could be a way that you're dealing with a particular problem. So, and of course, it could be number of clients that is also value and defined in that way. So if we're moving on to the next part on that, on from opportunity to risk, I took out a few examples here of risk. What then the one risk that you would highlight here?
I think it's got to be that dependency point. Yeah, and to not to reiterate it, but I think if you're thinking about, this is a clear, there's an opportunity to, I guess, either like kind of double down and go deeper in that sector and become almost sort of untouchable in it, or then this is where the strategy stuff gets really interesting, or do you try and diversify? So I guess it's going to be very specific to you and the situation that you're in. But if actually a lot of the value you're bringing isn't just the knowledge of that one sector or industry or business area or function, but actually it's the whole value proposition that you bring in terms of like how you deliver your training and who you work with and all the rest of it. I would really be thinking about like, can you diversify? Can you bring other people into the business who can help deliver in the same way with the same value proposition, but potentially for another sector or for an adjacent sector, perhaps is the easiest way to go. So yeah, I definitely think that dependency point leaves you quite exposed if that's kind of your long-term strategy. I think succession is also a big point here, because if you're dependent on yourself or a few kind of very, very specialist individuals, then it becomes, particularly thinking about a buyout, that's quite a hard sell for someone who might come and buy you out, because you have such a key person dependency on one or a few individuals. It's something we actually have a business in NatWest called Mentor, which is kind of HR. They do training, but it's a bit broader than that. But that's one of the things that we wrestled with when that business was going through some disruption and we had people leaving. It's like, actually, how do we make the value of this business not in the individuals who are just going into our customers, but how do we create something scalable? And we created a digital platform to help us do that and to go broader. And that's another thing to think about. It's not necessarily just the sector, it's also the channel through which you're operating and the geographies through which you're targeting as well. So there's more than one way to diversify. But that would be my key one.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. Let's look at the third model now. I'm also looking at the time. We have 10 minutes to go, and I want to ask some closing questions as well. So over the next 5-6 minutes, we're going to have a look at this commodity provider. So this is the third kind of strategy, and commodity provider means that quite often it's more about scalability. It could be about price, so lower you're a price fighter, or the ease of access. And some examples that I've given here is on scalability. I think most people understand what LinkedIn Learning is, and customer segments. So everybody who is on LinkedIn, I think that is a good example of a mass market. And who pays for LinkedIn, they get LinkedIn Learning as part of that. So that's a scalability example. I use price as FSB example. So the Federation of Small Businesses is actually, I'm a volunteer in that myself, so I know them quite well. Within the Federation of Small Businesses, there is an offer for people to get training as well on lots of different topics. And the differentiator here is definitely price. For a very low price, you can a monthly subscription, you get access to that training. So it's in addition to your FSB membership fee, but price is definitely the differentiator. And the third one, but you have to buy it separately. So the third example is if you're an accountant and you're a member of ACCA, then ease of access, because as an accountant, you have to do CPD, continuous professional development, for about 40 hours a year, I believe. And by offering the training and measuring the number of hours within the ACCA platform, it's very easy for accountants to access that. So those are three examples of how that commodity play could work. Usually it's about volume distribution, but also your relationship with your customer is very transactional. It's very easy to switch it off. So those are some ideas around that. Now, if we look at some risks within that, evidencing impact, transactional relationships, technology developments. Suddenly a new technology comes around and you need to keep innovating. What, Dan, do you think one of those is that you recognize or?
Yeah. This is quite specific. So when I look at the commodity kind of provider, I'm assuming we don't have like Reid Hoffman or like the LinkedIn anyone from LinkedIn on the call, but um, I think the value chain for this one is quite interesting, and where you sit in the value chain is kind of important. So the main risk that I see is what we call disintermediation, which is basically where someone can come and get between you and your end customer. So I guess to kind of bring that to life a bit, if you're someone who has their own little kind of learning portal through which you kind of distribute e-learnings, maybe it's for a specific sector, maybe it's kind of executive coaching or whatever it is, but actually LinkedIn Learning have come along and they are getting all of the kind of the eyeballs from the customers. So you think, okay, well, what I can do is I can pivot and I can become just a provider of training programs into LinkedIn. Well, you're leaving yourself in a pretty exposed position, I would say, if you do that, because they are a much more platforms always have an incredible amount of buyer power, which means they are going to force your price down. And if you don't like it, and if it is truly a commoditized product that they can get elsewhere, guess what? They'll go elsewhere and it just becomes a race to the bottom. So what you don't want to be, I think, is stuck in like a race to the bottom on price, because you're just going to end up destroying all your value. Now, if you do have a kind of a platform and you think that it's like reasonably defensible because you've got like people are subscribing to it, maybe it's like one of a couple of other things that you do, then I think you're in a better position. But I think the key point here is, how do you not just be transactional? Because if you're just transactional, you're always replaceable. So for me, the question would be, how do particularly in this space, how do you use technology? Potentially it's AI, but it doesn't have to be AI. But how are you using your digital channel and your platform to drive customer engagement? Because customer engagement is what's going to keep customers coming back. And it might not just be the training that does that, right? Again, it might be because you have partnerships with other kind of adjacent businesses that can come and offer some more value to your customers. It might be because actually you bolt on some other product that actually then creates a very powerful customer proposition. As I was saying with our accounting package, having that bolted in to our banking solution means that our customers, frankly, it's harder for them to leave us, because if all their accounts and all their taxes are being managed by us, then if they want to switch their bank account, that becomes quite a painful process, right? It's a traditional kind of strategy. It's the Apple thing of, they have all the apps on their thing, but they have the one ID that logs in, right? So guess what? It's really hard for me to get rid of my iPhone, even though like that all the stuff on it is kind of commoditized to a certain extent. So I think it's, how do you position yourself to drive customer engagement in what is like a very difficult space to do that? And how do you stand out from the crowd?
Nice one. Excellent. Thanks for that. Um, and actually, the several of the things that you mentioned there really resonate with what we stand for as well, because in the end, we believe that most training companies need to be more data driven, and data really drives decision making. You mentioned a point earlier to is crucial to drive the evidence that you want to create and give to either your customer, your buyer, your other whoever your stakeholders are. But also data drives the collaboration. It drives collaboration with your clients. If you can go back to your client and say, we did a training with you 3 months ago, I can now see that of the 5 topics we talked about, 3 of them really landed well, but 2 of them didn't, and we would like to come back for a day to cement in those 2 other topics. That is That is where data drives collaboration with customers. But also, data is not needed with innovation. To innovate, to do different things, co-creating with clients, but also co-creating with vendors in the industry, with maybe unlikely partners that come from another industry. So there are different opportunities that you can give yourself here. Now, without taking those 3 as the necessary point, but Dan, I wanted to close off with asking you two questions. One, what decision do I need to make in December 2025 to reach that objective in December 2030? So 5 years from now, what is it that I'm really facing now?
Can I give two? Is that
Okay,
okay?
please.
Okay. So the first one, and this is going to sound slightly self-serving as someone who's spent a career working in strategy, but if you haven't got one, get a strategy written down and pin it on your wall at home or in your office or wherever you are, right? Because without a clear strategy, anything else is just kind of hopes and dreams. And hopes and dreams don't usually come true without a hell of a lot of hard work that has to go into it. But I just give you a very simple framework if you don't know how to go about that. And it's called the three C's. And basically it's customer, competitors, and company or capability, you could think of it as, right? So firstly, who are my customers today? How many of them are there? What are their needs? What are the trends that are affecting them? Where could there be more customers for me to go after? All those kinds of questions. You can Google this stuff. It's pretty well, it's like kind of typical MBA stuff, but definitely like the customer point. Then competitors, who are they? Like what's the makeup of the market? Is it lots of small competitors? Are there some big players? How have the dynamics shifted? Have there been mergers? All those kinds of questions. How are they pricing? How are they engaging customers? How are they what channels are they using to win? And then finally capability. So what is it that I've got that's different, and what can I use that will set me apart and allow me to win in this space? So I think that is like, you could, even if you just did that exercise and just had that kind of on one sheet of paper, if you've got nothing today, that would be a heck of a lot better. I think related to that, and you can do this before or after you've done this exercise, but set yourself a really clear vision with a measurable goal, right? So it could be, I want to sell my business in 2030, but what I would also add to that is, I want to sell my business for X amount of money, or I want my business to be in this position with this level of profitability and turnover, which will enable me to sell my business, I think, for this amount of money. So have a vision that is ambitious but specific, so you'll know when, if you're on the right track to meeting it. The second point would be, think about then how you're going to grow and how you're going to get there. Now, some of that comes from your strategy, but that's just like one page. It can be one page. I mean, I've written strategies that are 100 pages long, but it can be one page. But how are you going to get there? And growth can just happen because you like hire the next right person, but often you're going to need financing. And this isn't a pitch for you to come to NatWest and take a loan out. It definitely isn't that, but there are definitely different routes to financing with very different implications if you need capital to grow. So very like high level equity, they're either going to be looking for trajectory, or they're going to be looking for something that's completely broken that they can make loads of value out. Now hopefully we're not in the broken bit. We're demonstrating trajectory, earnings growth, all that good stuff. So if you think about that way, and ultimately selling out, that trajectory is the thing to think about. Debt, banks like us, we like consistency. So if you have like consistent earnings, we're going to be wanting to lend to you. We're not too fussed if you want to grow further. I think, Jan, that was the other question going to be about advice, and where to go.
Yeah. Where do
Well,
we go?
well, again, not pitching for NatWest, but that is something that any bank should be able to help you with, and at least offer you a conversation on. Some banks, I'll be honest, are going to be a lot better at that than others. I don't want to say whether NatWest is amazing at it, but what I will say, and hopefully you know this, Jan, that we have a great accelerator program. We're very, very passionate about helping small businesses to grow, but we're not the only ones. Barclays have a great similar program to our accelerator. So, if you bank with Barclays, go and have a chat to them. We also have venture banking teams who literally help businesses to sell out so do have a chat with your bank, but obviously you've also got your accountant, you'll have your peers, your peer network in the industry, friends, family who might be business owners as well. These are all great sources of advice in my book.
Well, thank you so much. I've said the word excellent so many times now. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for everybody that joined us today. Keep an eye out for the next one. The next one will be in January. So I wish everybody fantastic Christmas period, end of year, start of the new year. We'll talk again. Thank you and
Merry
goodbye.
Christmas. Thank you.